Why would less than 1% of people in the world have any sense of clarity about their purpose and the other 99% do not? It's because it requires nuance, it requires deep questions, it requires getting specific about things that are really in your subconscious automatic mind and not in your conscious mind. And this was my primary frustration. So when I got about 5 to 6 years into researching purpose, what I noticed was archetypes through all of my coaching and interviewing people started to pop up. So I noticed that there were 4 elements to purpose. I noticed that somebody had a natural advantage, a particular role they tend to play in life and work. I noticed that they had a bucket of skills. I noticed that they like to solve certain types of problems, whether they were problems of need, problems of injustice, problems that are like big macro problems that they want to bring simplicity to. And then the fourth thing that I noticed in terms of the fourth element was a strength associated with overcoming hard things. And that's usually established in their childhood. So something natural, something acquired, something related to problems they solve, and then something related to how they overcome hard things.
Brian Bosché, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
Thanks for having me, my friend. Man, I just got to come across the pond and hang out with you.
You really do. It's a long way. Yeah, the last time I came to hang out with you, I think it took me 23 hours of traveling. So
just a bit. We were like, you know what? You don't have to come to Dallas. We're going to go further west. We're going to go to Phoenix,
exactly.
And then have you fly to Phoenix.
That's it. Yeah. Dallas is way too easy. But Brian, in what I know of you, I'm going to say you're an unusual individual because you specialize in a subject that most people struggle with their entire lives. So you are a purpose expert, I think it's fair to say. And with your wife, Gab, who I've had the pleasure of being coached by Gab, you wrote the Purpose Factor book. You've founded the Purpose Company, and I know you have trained thousands of people to pursue their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yet when I speak to people in my own work, people struggle with what's my purpose? Why am I here? So the 2 questions I suppose we can start with is the what and why. What do you now believe purpose is? Because I know you've studied it for a long time, at least a decade. So what is purpose and why was Brian Bosché interested in doing all this work on purpose?
I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, they get really excited about studying a subject or creating a product or creating a service. And I think oftentimes that starts in excitement. For me, if I take you back 12 years ago, it didn't exactly start in excitement for me. It started in a place of depression. As you and I've talked before, back then, I got laid off and divorced in the same month. And I was laid off from my dream job and divorced in the same month. And so for me, having this question of what is my purpose started in a really deep place of depression, anxiety, frustration. And really where the frustration came from wasn't just the depression. It was that I had mentors, well-meaning friends and mentors telling me, Brian, you got to find your purpose. You really need to find your purpose without a whole lot of how-to, without a whole lot of step-by-step. And that actually was the origin as to why I was so frustrated, because my perception back then was that the discovery of purpose was incredibly emotional. A lot of folks had led me to believe it was kind of a journey experience. And at the end of that journey, good luck with discovering it. And I'll never forget where I was, because after I got divorced and after I got laid off, I jumped into a sales job. I was selling essentially motivational products, and I'll never forget it. I was on a really short phone call with someone, and I was in the middle of my pitch. And by the way, my pitch was on a script because I was a new salesperson. I had never sold before. And she said, listen, Brian, stop. Seriously, stop. I can't buy anything from you. I don't even know my purpose. And in this moment of sarcastic kind of honesty, I said, you know what? I don't either. And it was really that night. I think, by the way, side note, I think it's hilarious that I was selling essentially motivational products in the pits of depression. I thought that was kind of the contrast, which is most of the time, if you're working for some type of motivational company selling a motivational offer, you might be a motivated individual. I couldn't have been further from that. And so that night, I just started studying purpose like nothing I had ever studied before. And that was really the beginning of the journey 12 years ago. And here's what purpose is, because a lot of people equate purpose to some type of duty, like if they're a father or a brother or something like that. Some of them equate purpose to a specific job, and I always ask them, if your purpose is to be a good dad, what if you weren't a dad tomorrow?
Mm.
If your purpose was to be in this certain job, what if you weren't in that job tomorrow? Would you still have a purpose? And so the answer is yes. And the short answer is, if purpose is about living a life of contribution, then purpose is this. Purpose is the best of what I have to help others. The best. It's the whatever I have in terms of skills, perspective, wisdom, life experiences, I package all of that up and give it away in service of others.
But this, what you said there is if purpose is contribution. So does that mean you've defined purpose, that purpose ultimately comes down to the contribution we make?
It does. When you look at the most successful people in the world, the ones that all of us would agree, like if you were to take a garden variety celebrity that is living a life of fulfillment and maybe even prosperity, but mostly
Mm.
fulfillment, you would see that they are living a life of contribution. If they're in the world of entertainment, they're contributing great entertainment. If they're in the world of entrepreneurship and problem solving, they're delivering their best to solve those problems in the service of others. If you look at the most fulfilled people, they're giving away their absolute best to help other people.
So it comes down to how I serve the world, what I fundamentally believe the gift is I bring to the world.
Exactly, exactly.
And how do I discover that without being delusional? Because I might go, my gift to the world is to perform and to sing. And that's my gift to the world. Then you would hear me and you'd go, I'm not so sure. So I mean, are there a lot of delusional people?
Okay, so that's a funny question, and it's one of my favorite questions because all of us, whether you watch European television or American television, if you watch American Idol or Britain's Got Talent or whatever show you watch, there are plenty of people who might be very passionate about
Yes.
something, but passionately bad at something.
Yes.
And that's where, when you look at how we break purpose down into four elements. So, natural advantage, which is kind of like natural giftings. It's what is innate about you. It's that role you tend to play in life and work. But then the second element, the second bucket, is skills, acquired skills, which means I can't just look at what I'm passionate about. I can't just look at what I might have a natural proclivity towards. I actually need to look at, do I have a proficiency in a thing? Because if I don't have proficiency, I might be really happy to do it. I might be really happy to stand in front of a microphone to sing. But if I'm not any good at it, I'm not going to generate economic opportunity
Mm.
from it.
In fact, it would seem that, yeah, I mean, I remember watching X Factor, one of these talent shows many, many years ago. And you know where they do the whole setup, so they had the parents there with this young girl. It was a big setup, and it was terrible because when she sang, it was just awful. And as a parent to treat children, I remember watching and going like, she cannot sing. And I'm not saying she's not a beautiful human being, but she can't sing. And I think if that was one of my children, I would go, "You are a wonderful person. You have something incredible to bring to the world." But honey, it's not singing. So I wondered, were her parents tone deaf, or I don't know. I think, do people lean into some sort of fantasy as well, and they don't actually take into account, well, I need to be proficient in this as well.
It's interesting, right? Because if you're a really good parent, the question becomes, okay, so I'm in a tough spot.
Yeah.
She can't sing, but I also don't want to serve as a discouraging
Mm.
influence.
Yeah.
And if I let her go out there, it might be an embarrassing
Yeah.
moment. So she might experience the pain of embarrassment. So it's kind of a catch 22 because, if you ask me, hey, Brian, do you want to be overall an encouraging influence to somebody or a discouraging influence to somebody? I want to be an encouraging influence to someone, but I also want to be truthful, because if I'm a good friend or a good family member,
Mm.
I want to deliver truth in the best way possible, in the most loving way
Mm.
possible, to give somebody an honest opportunity to adjust where they are, and then actually go out and present to the world the best of who they are.
Mm.
But there's no question, because when I'm coaching individuals, whether I coach executives or coach people in large groups, doesn't matter. I'm always trying to optimize them to experience fulfillment and also to experience financial opportunity. Because when you look at the world of purpose, and Paul, I know you've noticed this, that there's like a bucket of woo-woo gurus.
Mm.
That's kind of like how I describe it. Like much more fluffy, much more emotional. They're trying to meditate their way to results, and meditation has its place. But I'm not that guy. I'm the practical purpose guy, which means if I only help you experience fulfillment, but I never help you experience quantitative, let's say financial
Mm.
gain, well, the lack of financial opportunity is eventually going to pull down your fulfillment.
Mm.
And it's also vice versa. If you have
Mm.
a lot of money, but no fulfillment, lack of fulfillment is going to pull down your economic
Mm.
opportunity over time as well. And so as I look at things, I want people to go after what they might have emotional connection to. Some would describe that as passion. I want them to go after what they have a natural proclivity towards, but I also want to make sure that in the world of social media that deludes people to think that they can get overnight results, that they actually have to get better in the skill set if they want to be successful over the long term.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I talk to people a lot about is this idea of overnight results, because I mix with a lot of entrepreneurs. I know a lot of very successful people, um, and I've engaged in lots of conversations over the years with those people. I have yet to meet the overnight success. I just haven't met him yet. I've sat in rooms with guys with businesses of hundreds of millions, and they will tell you the story of hardship and struggle, and that's the story. And when I hear those stories, sometimes because hey, it's my story too, but it's when I hear those stories, I wonder why I'm not. There obviously are overnight successes. I'm not doubting that at all. Like the
Hmm.
guy who released his first record and becomes Bob Dylan. I mean, this does
Of course.
happen. It's just extraordinarily rare, and all everyone I met has walked a path to success and fulfillment. I think it's really, particularly for the younger listener, I think that's really important that people realize that when they look at the people they admire, those people have a journey. Um, and I'm sure over the past 12 years, your journey to the success you have now. I mean, I know because I've heard you speak about it. You didn't fall out of bed, discover your purpose, and there it was.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a journey. One, to discover what purpose was, how to archetype it, how to turn it into a discovery process. And by the way, that process was just for me at first
Yeah.
because I was trying to figure out, okay, so I get dumped from my dream job. I want to get back into
Can I
national
ask you
media.
one question? Sorry, just
Hmm.
while you're there. You talked about the dream job. What was
Hmm.
that dream job? And what I'm saying is, were you unconsciously pursuing your purpose in that dream job?
If you asked me, I was 16 years old because when I was 16 years old, I wanted to become a national news anchor. I know some of the European types call it news reader
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
something like
You
that,
have the
right? So
voice
news
for
reader,
it. You have the
yeah.
voice for it.
Oh, I appreciate that. Man, I think it's just the microphone making me sound good. Um, but that's what I wanted to be. And if you were to ask me when I was 16 years old, 17 years old, 18 years old, as that dream was maturing, I probably would have told you that that was my purpose. Making the mistake, looking back in hindsight, to say a specific position
A job.
or a specific job was my purpose, because you always have to ask that question, well, wait a second, what if that never happens?
Mm,
Or what if it happens and you get laid off
mm,
from it? Do you not have a purpose? I mean, when you look at, I've worked with pro football players here in the United States,
mm,
different kind of football, and the ones that have gotten essentially cut from the NFL, and their whole identity has fallen apart because they were making the same mistake. They thought that being a pro football player was their purpose, and then that idea of their identity shattered, and they had to figure out what purpose really was. So, if you were to look back, 16 years old, me wanting to be a national journalist, I would have told you absolutely
mm,
yes.
mm,
That is definitely my purpose, but it took a little bit of age, experience, and setbacks to find out that's not the proper definition of purpose.
mm. Okay. But I can see that being a newsreader or whatever we call it, that is effective. You're being a communicator. You're in front of people
Hmm.
communicating, which to some
Yeah.
degree is exactly what you do now. I mean, a lot of your work now is speaking, it's communicating with people. So and sharing a message. And in some degree, in its essence, it's not dissimilar.
No, it's not. In fact, sometimes our initial dreams are more like not an exact picture of the future, but more like a carrot
Mm.
to get us to a future.
Mm.
So for example, by trying to become a national journalist, and back then too it was all about just being on television and my
Yeah,
ego and all of that.
yeah.
I'm much more driven today by transforming lives and transforming outcomes. So that has also shifted. But the desire to become a national news anchor, a national news reader, really was this carrot to incentivize me to get communication and messaging skill sets to be applied to be applied to what I do today.
It's interesting when you spoke about uh, the woo woo world where you maybe get fulfillment but you don't get prosperity, and I think it's I mean, I think I walk in both worlds.
Hmm.
For the past 4 decades, I've pursued building a business, but I'm going to say an obsessive, but I have a huge passive passion for meditation. I've been to India. I've
Yeah.
studied it for 40 years.
Yeah.
It's a The inner work and what you might call the work is a real passion of mine.
Yeah.
But I also like to fly business class. So there's my dilemma.
The two sides.
But here's the funny
Yeah.
thing: when I was in my 20s, 30s, um, what I used to do is I would lean into say business for I'm going to say 6 months or
Mm.
whatever, but I would lean completely into that. It's like I got to make money. I got to blah, blah. I would lean into
Hmm.
that world, and I would be buzzed and ultimately dissatisfied. And I would
Yeah.
come back. I would go for a walk, reconnect, meditate, whatever, and go, "Gee, man, it's not your purpose. You're not connecting with who you really are." I would lean then, I would obviously continue working, but I would lean more into I'll go on a retreat, a meditation retreat, I'll spend some time.
Hmm.
I would lean into exploring myself, and I would feel tremendous that peace for sense of fulfillment would return. I'd go, this is where I'm meant to be. I just need to get out and go meditate and do whatever.
Hmm.
And of course, what I found is that when I leaned into that, after a while that became this satisfaction. I was walking through it one day. I left my office, a big park beside it. I was walking in the office, and I was kind of going, I'm torn. Which is it? Am I to be a monk or a millionaire? I don't think my wife would have been too happy. Went home and told her I was going to become a monk. But that was and I was walking to the park one day, and there was this big flagpole in the park, and these iron rods supporting it, and it just
Hmm.
struck me, and I said, I'm the flagpole, and the flagpole is pulled by each, and I need to
Hmm.
pursue both. So in that moment, I came to a point of going, my nature is to pursue both, not to choose one over the
Hmm.
other. And then I came to peace with the fact that I love going to a meditation retreat, and I want to travel business. I just
Yeah.
even if people on one or other side find that objectionable, I found that I came to peace with that. So I think when people lean just into fulfillment, fortunately or unfortunately, we need
Yeah.
to pay our bills. We need to live. And when you're struggling with that, it's going to be difficult to find fulfillment.
I mean, there's the emotional and there's the
Yes.
practical. There is the need to make profit, and then there's the need to be a
Mm.
whole person. There is the need for meditation and prayer, and then there's a time for decision making and
Yeah.
action. It really is it's right brained, it's left
Mm.
brain, it's thinking and it's execution. We need both sides to what we're doing. And I had felt that when I examined all of the research, I mean, goodness, I've been researching purpose for over a decade now. So when I examined all the research on purpose, what I realized is it seemed like everybody was leaning into just the emotional side of discovery and journey and all of that, but not enough into the decision making side and the practicality side and the business strategy side. Because my goal when I work with anybody, I want to help you discover your purpose. So I want to help you specifically identify the best of what you have to offer to the world. Then behind that, I want to help you make a decision. And then behind that, I want to help you put a strategy to be successful in that thing, therefore optimizing for fulfillment first, and then with good strategy, financial prosperity as well.
And you refer to working with NFL players. So I'm just
Mm,
imagining if I'm a very successful NFL player and I've got it all, the women love me, I'm successful, I'm making enormous income, and now I'm dropped. That's got to be, I mean, the higher you are, the further you fall. That's got to be extraordinarily difficult. And I suppose when you help someone in that position find purpose,
mm,
they also need to find prosperity because
yeah.
it, ultimately they're not going to be fulfilled if they have to go now and live in a shack. It's just not
Yeah.
practical.
Yeah, and it is a mighty fall,
Yeah,
especially on the financial
yeah,
side, because even at the very minimums, I believe in the NFL, it's like 400, $700,000 U.S. minimum
yeah. It's
NFL
hard to replace
annual
that.
salary.
Yeah,
That's really hard to replace. You have to often, and so what happens is if you went just a year, you may not have had enough time to save up
yeah.
enough money to give yourself a break or some type of retirement. Or if you were in the NFL for a long time, but you were irresponsible with your finances and spent it all, you're also in a tough spot because inevitably, whatever job or role you take after the NFL or other pro sports, you're going to end up in a place where your annual income is likely lower.
Mm,
And one, it's an income problem. And then two, you've kind of like, because of the NFL and how much they make, right? We've kind of merged the idea of identity
mm,
and income together as if they are the same thing. I was just talking to a former NBA player, a basketball player here in the United States, and I was kind of shocked to find out. He said, "Listen, Brian, not all of the NBA players want to win the NBA championship." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? You make it to the NBA and then you don't want to be the best player or the
mm,
best team in the NBA?" He's like, "No, it's actually very transactional." Many of the NBA players would tell you that if I could just increase my average points scored per game, it would mean that I make this many more millions per year, and that's enough for me. In other words, it's both like identity and income. And he said it's the teams, not the ones driven by money, but it's the teams that have a high degree of conviction and connection with their fellow teammates that actually go for championships, meaning it's not the money, it's not the income
mm,
that is the primary driver.
mm.
But when I'm working with somebody who comes out of something like that and inevitably ends up in a lower income position or whatever, what we have to do is mine out from their pro athlete experience what came from that, what kind of perspective, what kind of wisdom. For example, many of the NFL players and NBA players that come out of those leagues, they have an incredible amount of discipline and drive and ability to overcome hard things like rejection, way more than any other human being.
Mm.
So they excel incredibly well in sales, in insurance, and fields like that allow them to perform as if there is still a scoreboard.
It's as you're saying that, what I'm thinking is that when you are when you are successful as those NFL players, but it's for any of us because we all have different degrees of success.
Yeah.
We tie up our self worth in that, and I think that's probably a huge part of the problem. I remember when we were in Phoenix, and two things stand out. I remember the first day, and it was maybe 30 of us in the room or so, and I remember Gab's big mistake, and her big mistake was asking everyone to stand up and introduce themselves, forgetting she's in a room of speakers.
That'll take 3 hours.
So instead of these people hi, I'm Paul Ryan, and these people jump up out of their seats, and so it was hilarious, but it was also wonderful just to see the spirit in the room, and just to see people and speaking with passion. So that was really really interesting. But as the weekend went on, to see how many of us then were reluctant to sell. And that was
Mm.
really, really interesting because when we took that into this whole piece about rejection. So, how I'm tying this back to purpose in my mind, and maybe you clarify it for me, is is there some sort of an innate fear in us that if pursuing purpose, I suppose, is essentially me being the best of me, so it's me being the truest of me,
Yeah.
is there a fear within us that if I speak that level of honesty about who I am and what I want, is it ultimately a fear of rejection that prevents me from doing that?
Most of the time. So I've studied childhood origin story or childhood experiences
Mm,
for probably for over
mm,
10,000 hours. I've helped hundreds and hundreds of people individually and thousands of people beyond
mm,
individual work. And over 80% of people's primary fear that was shaped because of their childhood
mm,
experience is a fear of rejection. And so, whatever your primary childhood experience was in terms of the primary
mhm,
theme or the primary moment that was most memorable or most painful, that will become or shape your primary fear as adult. So, if your primary childhood experience was an experience of rejection, maybe fatherly rejection, motherly rejection, sibling rejection, peer rejection, it'll shape your primary fear as an adult as a fear of rejection. But it's not like you walk around the world actively and consciously saying, "Oh man, I am really afraid of being rejected today." It's subconscious programming because there was an external voice to you as a kid, like a parent or something like that, that rejected you. But that external voice, when you become an adult, becomes an internal voice and your internal fear, your internalized fear. And so when people, it's funny because we work with a lot of keynote speakers, they really want to speak. And for a lot of speakers, they're wanting to speak to be seen. But there's a difference between being seen and selling. Because in selling, you're going to expose yourself to rejection 3 out of 4 times, 4 out of 5 times, depends on your close rate, right? So the majority of time you're getting no's. Majority of time you're getting ghosted. And it's actually a fear of rejection that holds almost everybody back from doing bold things, true things, full expressions of their purpose. That's the number one thing that holds them back. And actually, it's funny enough, I was just in a room with folks, like a small group, 12 people. And I asked them on a scale of 1 to 10 how they would grade their sales or persuasion skills. Now, all of these folks are top tier experts in their space. And 2 people in that room said like 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10. And then I actually had them play a sales game. Like there was a game where they had a seller persona and then they were selling to a different buyer persona. And I watched them sell in a gamified environment. I'm like, wait a second, it's actually not the sales skill set. It's the fear of rejection. And oftentimes the only way to overcome fear of rejection is exposure to rejection with a high enough reps where rejection feels normal. By the way, most people don't even know if they have a good close rate on a product or service if they haven't tried to sell the thing 30 to 50 times.
Yeah.
And so most people never make it past conversation 3 or 4, so they give up on a dream.
What was really interesting to me was sitting in the room that day when you started speaking about that, and you were talking about this thing with rejection, and and I was sitting there thinking to myself, no, I had a great childhood, or whatever. So rejection is not me. That was my thought. No, I reject. And then you listed through, I think it was the 5 traumas, which if you're comfortable, you might go through for the listener, because as you listed through them, I just thought, oh shit, oh shit, yeah, it's me too. It's me too. But it was kind of but the interesting thing for me, it was kind of a bombshell moment, because as you were speaking initially, I was going, no, it's not an issue. But then I said, oh my God, yes, it's me too. And the interesting thing about that is that what that means to me is that prior to that moment, it was subconscious. So in other
Yeah.
words, it was driven, and I would have said, "No, Brian, it's not an issue for me." And then when you become aware of it, I think the power of becoming aware of it is not to dwell on it. It's just now I get to question. And so my learning from it was, now I get to question my choices. So when I'm
Mhm.
making a decision, I can now go, okay, so you're not doing this, which is cool, by the way, Paul. You don't need to do anything you don't want to do. Can I just dig into what's your motivation? Is it A, you actually really don't want to do it, or B, you're a little bit scared shitless about doing it? Just be truthful. And
Yeah, let's just be honest about it. And I always tell people the easier way to identify whether or not you're fearing rejection, and by the way, and whether or not that's being your primary decision-making lens in whatever you're considering, instead of saying, am I afraid of rejection? Because that is usually more subconscious. I can ask you this question instead. As you're about to go do this thing, make this call, whatever it is, are you engaging in people pleasing? Are you engaging in perfectionism? Are you engaging in procrastination? When I see people engaging in one of those 3 things, because they're essentially brothers and sisters of each other, because people pleasing is what we do to avoid rejection in front of people. Perfectionism is what we do to avoid rejection before we see people. And then procrastination is just the avoiding of seeing people entirely. All of those are meant to protect ourselves from rejection. But oftentimes, especially in a social media world, we kind of wear those as a badge of honor, especially the perfectionism one. Oh, I'm a perfectionist.
yeah,
I'm a perfectionist. I want it to be right. And while that's probably partially true, you might have a bias towards excellence and all of that. That perfectionism at its extreme is an attempt for you, and it's a subconscious automatic thing at this point to protect yourself from being rejected by people, because you're like, before I see them, if I could just get this right, if I could just get this document right, if I could just get this pitch right, if I could memorize every single word, in your mind you're thinking they won't reject me.
Mm. But we don't admit that. We don't admit that to
Mm,
ourselves. I think that's the thing, and it's interesting you talk about you work with a lot of speakers. If you ask me tomorrow to get up on a stage and speak to 1,000 people, I go, yes, sure, I'll do that. That's no problem. And I know for a lot of people that's a huge fear. Some people say it's a
mhm.
bigger fear than death. That doesn't cross my mind. But if you ask me to, actually, it's more in a social environment. Yeah, if you ask me to go out and have dinner with one person I've never met before, I'm going, shit. It's so. I suppose it's just different scale. So I'm just wondering. So I think people listen to this, and you know, um, certainly people I know who listen to podcasts will pick up the phone and go, "Hey, that really resonated for me." So we've leaned into two things. One is, uh, I suppose, the importance, what purpose is, and the importance of it, and the second is all these things that it stand in our way. So, how do people begin to discover? They're driving in the car to listen to this. How do they begin to discover or unearth what the purpose might be? And then how do they begin to be truthful and become aware of what might be
Mm,
standing in their way? Because I think that's maybe where the woo-woo world falls down. The woo
yeah.
world is not confronting on, I really want to do this, and the truth of it is, this is, but I will need to address what's preventing me because I'll never get the other side of it. I don't address that.
Yeah. There's a couple of fundamentals. You know that great answers come from great
Mm,
questions. And so when somebody goes on a purpose discovery journey, whatever it is, they can only hope to ask themselves or get a book or a
mm,
podcast or a coach to ask them the right questions to get to the right
mm,
answers. And if you look at this, why would less than 1% of people in the world have any sense of clarity about their purpose and the other 99% do not? It's because it requires nuance, it requires deep questions,
mm.
it requires getting specific about things that are really in your subconscious automatic mind and not in your conscious mind. And this was my primary frustration. So when I got about 5 to 6 years into researching purpose, what I noticed was archetypes through all of my coaching and interviewing people started to pop up. So I noticed that there were 4 elements to purpose. I noticed that somebody had a natural advantage, a particular role they tend to play in life and work. I noticed that they had a bucket of skills. I noticed that they like to solve certain types of problems, whether they were problems of need, problems of injustice, problems that are like big macro problems that they want to bring simplicity to. And then the fourth thing that I noticed in terms of the fourth element was a strength associated with overcoming hard things. And that's usually established in their childhood. So something natural, something acquired, something related to problems they solve, and then something related to how they overcome hard things. And as I noticed those 4 buckets, I also noticed archetypes pop up in those 4 buckets. Like natural advantage had its own, archetypes, the skills had their own archetypes, etc. And my hypothesis years ago was, wait a second. If there are such things as personality tests like Myers-Briggs or Strengths Finders or whatever it is, how come nobody has successfully produced a purpose discovery assessment that works for the individual and for teams and for organizations, but at scale? Because the bridge we need to cross is we've got to go from helping the 1% discover their purpose because they fumbled into the right situation or they asked the right questions to helping the 99% of people discover their exact purpose. And so where we ended up, and you know this,
Yeah.
but where we ended up is we actually created the world's first truly scalable purpose discovery assessment called the Purpose Factor Assessment. And the way that we do it is we have people go through a 20-minute assessment to get a 45-page unique report on them. And it was one of those things, and Paul, you know this as an entrepreneur, that when you tell somebody you're going to turn purpose discovery into an assessment, your friends and family look at you and kind of think, uh, "Good luck with that.
Mm.
That's cute. You're you're probably not going to be able to do that, but whatever."
Go.
And that was the honestly, you know, this is an entrepreneur too. That's the best motivation in the world
Mm.
for an entrepreneur is for them to be told you can't do that. And that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, but I mean, as you lay it out there, it also becomes quite obvious that you had discovered these patterns to purpose. And I suppose I
Yeah.
suppose that's what we learn about life, is that there are patterns to everything. And if we look at successful people, if we look at people who aren't successful, we see patterns. And so what you had discovered is that there were different patterns to how purpose evolved in people's life.
Yeah.
And all it seems you did was created questions that guide them to answer those questions, which became your purpose factor. Um, and that's something now people can just go onto your website, and
Yeah.
they can just do. So what's the website for that? We will
Oh
put
yeah.
we,
Just
we will put in the link, but just because don't not to be frustrating people. And I mean it's inexpensive. It's like I'm going to say $50-$60 or something. It's
yeah, it's like 49 bucks
yeah.
with the coupon, I think.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it's relatively inexpensive. Either way, it's inexpensive. It's cheaper than getting a coach for an hour who has no idea what his purpose is. Never mind you.
100%. And I, in the beginning, had plenty of those, which is why I was so frustrated. It was like, wait a second, this guy or this lady is supposed to give me clarity, but I kind of feel like I have, even though I'm struggling, I feel like I might have more clarity on me than they have on
Yes,
themselves.
yeah.
So I've definitely been there before. So the domain's simple. Just go to purposetest.com. That's purposetest.com. Yeah, it's 49 bucks. You'll get a essentially go through a 20-minute assessment, and you'll get 45 pages on you
Mm.
and your exact purpose and specific language, words, and phrases that you can put to it.
Yeah, having done this myself, there probably is some value. I mean, you get a report, you can study it. Is there also some value in getting someone who understands that to walk you through it afterwards? Or do you feel that's I mean, I did it with Eric. I felt it was helpful after for because so I did the purpose assessment. I read through it. It was helpful for me at the time, was Eric, that for to explain to me
Yeah.
um how it made sense. Now, by the way, if someone's listening to the explanations, I think maybe that would help, because they understand what they're looking for, and to some degree they're understanding the buckets. So is that also something of value to people to have that? Do you think it's necessary?
Oh, totally. I mean, I still think that regardless of how smart you are,
Hmm.
or how great a questions you ask, or how far along you are, maybe in terms of income or quality of life, that whatever it is, you've got to get somebody that's outside of yourself to ask questions that you didn't think to ask of yourself. The document really exists like a personal constitution, because my goal there was to give people words, phrases that they could use to describe the best of what they have. And really, if you were to never have anybody take you through your document, there's a couple of questions that you want to ask yourself. After spending some time sitting down with a cup of coffee, cup of tea, glass of wine, whatever, reading your assessment for a solid 45 minutes to an hour, just sitting there and digesting it, highlighting the parts that most resonate with you. The goal there is to take it subconscious to conscious, because every time you get a new word or a new phrase that you can use to describe something, we've taken it to a conscious level. And there's usually two situations that people find themselves in. They're trying to figure out how to optimize their current situation, meaning they don't want to make a change. They're not trying to quit their job. They're not trying to run off and start a company or anything. They just want to optimize their current situation. That's bucket one. Bucket two is somebody who's trying to decide how they're going to make a change, maybe change jobs or go start a company or whatever. In the first instance, where it's like, how do I optimize my current situation? Well, it's read your report and ask yourself the question, how in this current situation can I offer more of this or more
Mm.
of the best of what I have?
Mm.
And if you're trying to decide, okay, I need to leave this thing, boss is a jerk, whatever, as you consider the new opportunities that are in front of you, one, two, three opportunities, you're considering different job offers or whatever, or entrepreneurial opportunities, the question becomes, which of these opportunities will allow me to give the best of what I have? Because if they won't allow me to give the best of what I have, here's the problem: you won't experience fulfillment, because fulfillment's a feedback loop. Fulfillment's the result of helping people with the best of
Mm.
what you have. So if you take an opportunity that doesn't allow you to give the best,
No.
you can't experience fulfillment in return. And this is the key point: fulfillment is a fuel that drives sacrifice. So fulfillment is a fuel that drives sacrifice, because we have to sacrifice. Sacrifice, it's a law as immutable as gravity, that success demands
Mm.
sacrifice. And so you're not going to be in a good position to sacrifice to the necessary degree if you're not in a fulfilling opportunity or situation.
If you're not really driven. And I think in both of those situations, I think if I mean, most people, well, sorry, this is my my opinion, and but you have the experience. A lot of people are probably to some degree on track. I mean, they're
Mm.
probably not a million miles off. They're not a million miles off the type of road they should be on. And then when they get clarity on their purpose, even within the company or the role they're in, they probably now it confirms to them that I need to lean in this direction. I maybe need to
Yeah.
I need to lean in that direction. So is it your experience that a lot of people it's nuance for more people as opposed to radical change?
It is more about, especially for people who are already moderately
Yeah,
successful.
because they must have
They're
to
doing
some degree gone
they're
down the right road.
they've figured something
Yes,
out.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
there's some level of
yeah,
proficiency
yeah.
in something and that the world is rewarding them for
Yes.
that. Um, for example, my purpose factor statement out of my own report is my purpose is to act with conviction to solve meaningful
Yeah,
problems. The act with conviction speaks to my natural advantage, which is the truth teller. I like to dig for
yeah.
principles. I like to dig for the truth.
Mm,
I like to ask a lot of questions to solve meaningful problems, meaning I love taking big, macro, complex, hard problems and creating simple, scalable solutions for them. So if you look at what I do on a day to day basis, I have put myself in the red hot center of being able to do that, act with conviction to solve meaningful problems. And then the other side of my purpose is what most fulfills me. My fulfillment statement is to be truly present to strategically plan and navigate.
mm.
Truly present. I have the way I overcome hard things is through presence. I show up even if it's hard. And also, the primary sum total of my skills, a lot of people think it might be communication or something like that, but it's actually strategy. And so I have taken my entire situation, my day to day, to make sure that I can act with conviction to solve meaningful problems and put myself in a position to be present so I can strategically plan and navigate what we should do next as a business. And so for me, just having those two statements from my own report
Mm.
allow me to stay as focused as a rifle, meaning when new opportunities come up for me, I cut it against that filter. Because if I can't say yes, it puts me in a position to do those things. I'm not going to be fulfilled. And we as a company, we as a team, me as a leader, I'm not going to perform at my absolute best.
Does that also mean that you're aware of those things within your life and within your business that you need to delegate?
Hmm.
Because particularly in a business environment, lots of stuff needs to be done that may
Yes.
not be within your wheelhouse, and it gives you the awareness to go, well, I know that needs to be done, but I
Hmm.
also know if I do that I will be unfulfilled doing that. If
Yeah.
I'm unfulfilled, it's likely I don't have great skill, I'm not likely to develop the skill. So
Yeah.
do you find it gives you that clarity to kind of sift what you should be doing, sorry, you shouldn't be doing, as well as what you should be doing?
100%. To know what I am is to know what I'm not.
Yes.
So, for example, in my natural advantage is the truth teller. Again, I like to dig for principles. I like to go deep on
Mm,
concepts, which allows me to be a phenomenal creative product creator.
mm.
What I'm not in my natural advantage is the overseer. The overseer is the type of person who likes to day to day take care
Yeah.
of people and things.
Mm.
The person who has a high execution bias and a high management bias, that's actually not my bias. So I have to make sure that I effectively delegate and automate things associated with that because I know if I put myself in a position to have to do that, I can do it in short sprints, but I can't do it over a long, effective timeline. And so I have to make sure that I'm using what I'm great at as a decision making tool, but what I'm not great at as a decision making tool as well.
Yeah, I find I can manage people relatively competently because I did it for a long period of time, but only relatively competently and at a high cost to me because it's
Yeah.
not me being me. And I would say my life changed and our business changed when I looked that in the face and said, no, there are other people who are enormously competent doing that. Get them to do it. I'm wondering also. We talked about people making radical change in their lives. I think, and we also talked of the person who is in the shitty job and radically has to make a change. And I think that most people in that situation are making decisions about what they want to escape from or get away from,
Yeah.
as opposed to making decisions about what they want to move towards. Uh, And I think you need to know both, but I think you need to be focused on what you want to move towards as opposed to what I just want to get away from.
You nailed it exactly. Most people run away from pain
Yeah.
as opposed to pursue a dream.
Mm.
Um, Now, there's value in both because one of the things that I'm obsessed with is not the word motivation. That word is really an
Mm.
insufficient word. I think a lot of people look to motivation as a day to day fuel, but there are some days where you're having bad days.
Mm.
There are some days where you're sick and you still have to show up and get things done. The person who is sick and still gets things done doesn't have motivation; they have conviction,
Mm.
which is this elevates what I'm doing to the level of duty, and I must do it no matter what.
Mm.
And where conviction comes from is a combination of pain and clarity. Because if you ask a person, "Hey, why do you want to make a change?" Because I can't stand this, I can't stand that, I don't like this, I don't like that. The pain is usually very conscious.
Yeah.
They can put a label
But it's a
to it.
big driver.
It's a big
Mm.
driver. And I'm by the way, if you have clarity and pain, you got a great
Yeah.
combination if you have them at the right time. Because pain is the driver, clarity is the
Mm.
direction. But most people, this I when people when I just start coaching people like from the beginning when we've just started our relationship, I always have to like face palm when somebody says they show up on their first coaching call, they go, "I've quit my job." And I'm like, ugh.
Mm.
Why so quickly?
Yeah.
Very rash judgment
Yeah.
there. It sounds like you might have done that because you're frustrated with the situation. But one of the reasons we're coaching together is because you're not clear about the
Yeah.
situation. And so if you're going to decide to leave a thing, first of all, you better have some money.
Yeah.
But second, let's have some direction. We want drive and direction. We want clarity and
Mm.
pain. And so clarity is who am I? Clarity is also what's my target?
Mm.
Clarity is also the first few steps to make progress in that direction. But on the other side, pain, you got to have this too, because you won't move if you don't have pain. You've got to have pain that is uncoped, uncomfortable. And in terms of time, it's not put off. You're not engaging in delay. I'm okay if somebody is driven mostly by pain and
Yeah.
they want to get away from something as long as they have a clear direction that they're going.
Yeah, surely, certainly some of the biggest changes I've made in my life were as a result of pain. But you said it appropriately there. But I was clear where I wanted to go, and pain is a great is a great driver. Um, is purpose innate? And what I mean by that is that is it something I am born with? Was I born somehow? And maybe this is a spiritual question, so I'm just exploring it. Was I born with somehow a different purpose to you? Because everything you say about purpose, which I love, by the way, is very, very practical because it's very practical. It makes it easier for people to get clear in it. But what's your thought on it? Is it something innate? Am I revealing my purpose,
Hmm.
or am I creating my purpose?
I believe, and we definitely get into when you get to this part of purpose
Mm.
for anybody, you will eventually inevitably have to get to a worldview question.
Yeah.
You know what you believe and where it comes from. I do believe that it is a revelation project and a discovery project. But if I could go more nuance on that, I would say it's also nature and nurture.
Mm.
There's because if purpose is the best of what I have to help others, there are certain things that are great about me that are innate, my nature. There are also certain things that are great about me that were nurtured. So nurtured, for example, would be the acquisition of skills.
Mm.
So if I acquired skills, that's not nature, that's nurture. I decided to get these skills through life, work, and
Mm.
education. There's another part too that's also nurtured and not nature, which is typically how we learn to overcome hard things. That's a nurture experience, which is what I experienced in childhood, what I experienced in early adulthood. This gave me a unique set of perspective and wisdom that was nurtured through an
Mm.
experience. But then there's the other side, which is the nature side. And here's what I've noticed about people: the thing that appears to be more nature, more innate, is going to be natural advantage, the role you tend to play in life and work. And if, for example, if you were to observe 5 to 7 kids playing together on a playground, you would notice some natural proclivities in how they interact with each other
Mm.
compared to how the other kid interacts.
Mm.
And so there's certainly the innate side the nature side, but there's also the nurture side too.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly noticed this with my own children, and they're all adults now. But my wife was very good at understanding at an early stage um, what they would lean towards, and I would say they've all entered into roles in life that suit them, for one of a better word. And it takes you down a much better road. Um, as we come to the end, someone who's listening to this podcast or driving along, and they're getting clear that I would say hopefully they're getting clear in two things. One is there's a real value in knowing what my purpose is. There's also real value in knowing what are those maybe traumas, if that's what you call them, are
Sure.
standing in my way. What's the best next step for someone to move forward in both of those areas?
First things first, they've got to listen to more Paul Ryan.
Oh, thank you. That's a great
Okay, they
advice.
gotta they gotta listen to more Paul Ryan. Okay,
Thank
they
you.
got to do that. That's the first thing. The second thing is we've got to get clear on our purpose, the best of what we have to help others. So get clarity on
That's the
that.
starting point.
That's the starting point. But the second part, and this is the really important part, because our childhood experience before we become adults shapes our fears.
Mm.
Because there are two types of decisions, and most people make decisions according to fear, not according to purpose. So most people are actually engaging in a decision making process that looks like this: how do I avoid rejection? How do I avoid loss? How do I avoid
Mm.
uncertainty? And while that will protect you from things, it doesn't necessarily serve you well. So that is a reactive way to make decisions. That's a protective way to make decisions. The other way to make decisions is to say, this is my purpose. This is the best of what I have to help others. I'm going to optimize my opportunities and relationships to allow me to do more of that. That's not the majority of people. That's a minority of
Yeah.
people, but that's the minority of people who are experiencing fulfillment and oftentimes, with good strategy, greater financial prosperity. Now, here's what drives the fear: it's the childhood origin story. And for over 80% of people, it's going to be a storyline of rejection, most likely parental rejection. I always encourage people to weaponize two things with respect to overcoming the effects of their childhood origin story: weaponize gratitude, and then weaponize forgiveness. Weaponizing gratitude looks like this: I went through this childhood rejection experience with my father, and here's why I'm thankful that I went through it.
Mm.
Because it gave me grit, gave me determination, it gave me push throughedness. It taught me how to interact as an adult earlier than some of my other childhood friends. It taught me all these things. In fact, if you were to do a bulleted list of what it gave you versus everything it took from you, the bulleted list of what it gave you would be longer than what it took
Yeah.
from you. The second part is weaponizing forgiveness. Now, most people have a hard time with this because they're like, that parent
They want to
is like
hold on.
still,
Yeah.
they want to hold on to. And because oftentimes we shape our identity with the pain we know.
Mm.
Oftentimes we it's like we have an identity that's based in our ailment, not an identity based in our purpose. And so what I tell people, hey, if you got a frustrating parent, it's really easy to be frustrated at the 62-year-old parent, the 70-year-old parent, whatever it is that reminds you of all the things that they did when you were a kid. But here's a better way to look at it. I want you to imagine as if that frustrating person in your life was a 12-year-old. They were a child that went through a thing, and that when they grew up as an adult, they lived that out on you. They experienced rejection from your grandparents, and now that they're your parents, they played out rejection on you. And so I always tell people, look at the scared version, the scared 12-year-old version of that person, and forgive the kid version of that person, because that's where it came from for them too.
Yeah, that's really powerful because um, the question is, are you going to perpetuate that through your life and
Right.
to the next generation, or are you going to move on from it? It's interesting. We started the conversation uh, early on about this idea that all of the most of the successful people we know have walked a hard road, and what that means is these things that are standing in our way, which are fear, rejection, and failure. I suppose the truth of it is, if you're standing on the other side of creating a more successful life and you want to build that life, on that road, you will experience failure, knockback, rejection, disappointment. You will experience all of those things. If you're not up for experiencing all those things and just moving the fuck on, then stay then stay where you are. That's that's my closing thought. Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I would certainly encourage everyone to go ahead and do the purpose assessment and see where it takes them, because I think it's a wonderful resource, and it's a great tool that somebody can take away, and they can just spend 20 minutes on this, and they can come out with something of great value. Where else can people find you and learn more about Brian Bosché?
Of course, actually, if you go to purposetest.com and you get your assessment, the ways to connect with us, like on Instagram, on YouTube, and all of that, it's all there as well. So if I just send you to one place, you'll be able to find it all.
Excellent. Well, we will put a link there. We will send them there. And Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you again. And thank you very much. I think you've had so much value to our listeners. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, Paul. Thank you.